We're going to tie a hula damsel. We begin with a wiggle shank. This is the small ones. And this is going to be the abdomen section of our hula damsel. The thread I'm using is Uni 17-aught Tricot in white. We begin at the eye and lay a base of thread on this shank. Now we're going to not use the whole length of the shank. We'll use about 3/4 of it. And cover it in thread, bring it to the back. I'm going to take 3 ostrich hurls and just leave a little bit of a tail. The tails are about half the length of the shank. And they're not really a tail, there's some kind of paddle on a hula damsel. And what it'll do is when you strip this fly through the water, the back end will wiggle and the tails, quote unquote tails, or ostrich hurl will wiggle also. It'll just enhance that wiggle. Tie it in with one wrap. Lock it down. Now I'm going to take a piece of D-rib in olive, small, and I'm going to heat up a pair of hemostats and crimp the end of it so I get a taper, so I don't get a buildup. You don't have to heat your hemostats very long. You're just wanting to create a taper. I used to do this with a knife or an X-Acto blade. I got tired of cutting my fingers when I cut so many of these. I just do it with a pair of heated hemostats. Creates a nice flat area. And I'll trim a bit of it off. That alcohol lamp in the back, you can just get that at any eBay. They have them on eBay. Just go under alcohol lamp. Now I'm going to lock it in. And then I'm going to take another spool of 17-aught uni, tie it in behind the eye of this shank. And then I'm going to wrap the D-rib up until the eye and then use this second spool of thread to tie it off. I'm going to build a little bit of a taper. You don't have to. I'm just being picky. All right, now I'm going to take my D-rib and wrap it up to the front with concentric wraps, butted up against each other. Now I get a little bit of tension on the D-rib, and I'll ease off on that tension. So I've got not only the thickness of the shank, but I've also got tension on the D-rib to give it thickness and to make it taper. When I first came up with this fly, I needed a way. I'd see those damsels swimming, nymphs swimming in the water. I go, there's got to be a way to make them move. You'll notice that in nature, the head stays still and the body does all the wiggling, what they call a sinusoidal motion in the background. The trick is a lot of people do articulated flies, but they're usually much, much larger than this. So I've tied off my D-rib. Now I'm going to take that ostrich curl and pull it along the sides. And then I'm going to wrap my thread up through it to capture it. Now if you'll see on a regular damsel, they don't have gills on it, but I put them on there just to give it more motion on the back. I'm just going to make my way up to the front. I'm trying to keep the ostrich curl on the sides of the shank as much as possible. I don't try to hit every single rib. I get most of them though. Now I'm going to trim off my excess and tie off that ostrich curl. Here I'm getting a little too fickle. I've got my magnifier and my bodkin and I'm just pulling out some of the hairs. They got trapped a little bit, but not much. So you just take a second. Now I'm going to take a pair of wire cutters, and the portion that I used to mount in the vise, I'm going to nip that off. Just cut it off. And we'll set that aside. Now I'm going to take a 2487, and this happens to be a size 14. It's just a bit oversized. You could use a 16, but I oversized it just a little bit to give me more gape. The bead I'm using is a 2.0 millimeter tungsten bead, brass colored. Now I'm going to tie in my thread. Once again, it's that 17-aught uni tricot thread. And I'm going to take a piece of 50-pound mono. And you can just go to your local hardware store and say, hey, I'd like to buy a yard of this, and they'll sell it to you for less than 50 cents. And what I'll do is I'll take a piece that's probably half inch to 3/4 of an inch long, and crimp it in the middle. These are going to be my eyes. Now take my tweezers, hold it in tweezers, and run it through the tip of the flame, and it'll pick up some of the soot so I don't have to darken it as much with a marker. This is a good trick. See where I'm going through the middle tip of that flame? It actually picks up some of the soot, and it's even on both sides instead of having to melt one side and then melt the other. And I'll just figure it on. Now I leave a little bit of space between the eyes and the eye of the hook, because I'm going to have to pull my medallion sheeting up over the top of that and fit it into there. And this is just a simple figure 8. I am going to put a drop of super glue on there also though. I push my bead right up against it and then bring my thread behind that bead. Now I lay down a base of thread, and I'm going to take a piece of 3X fluorocarbon, and it's actually going to be my hinge. I'll take it and I'll flatten one end of it, leave a space of about 3/8 of an inch, and flatten it again. And what I'm doing is I'll tie in the first flattened area, attach my tail or abdomen section, pull it over, and then have the two flattened areas of the tippet match. Because flattened to flattened is going to hold a lot better than flattened to circular or round. And see, I flattened the front end of it. Now go back 3/8 of an inch, flatten it again. Those two flattened areas are going to match up, and then leave a loop, and that's my hinge area. When I first built these, I actually left the hook on the back shank. I don't care what I did, it just would not hold. So I just took that hook off the back side of it. I take my abdomen, I'll do one little wrap, and then I'll adjust it by pulling on the abdomen section so that the two flat sections match up. Now I'm going to take that tippet material, tie it down, and then pull it over the top of the eyes, underneath the hook of the shank, and back over the top again, and then tie it down to the back. And trim it. And then I'll tie down the rest of that thread. So I get a pretty, I'm not getting any pressure is going to be on that abdomen section, but it's not going anywhere. I don't have them fail very often. And just to enhance it, I'll put a little super glue there. Now I've got a piece of medallion sheeting, and this is in hopper green or mottled green or mottled olive, and it's about 1/8 of an inch to 3/32 wide, 3/16 wide, and it's going to be my wing case. Now tie it in back until where I first tied in the tippet. Now I'm going to create a dubbing brush out of CDC and a pinch, and I do mean a pinch, only 6 or 7 fibers of UV ice dub in light olive. I just need a little bit of sparkle. And I only need one side of a CDC feather. See, I've got it trapped in my clip. And trim off the stem. And see, I just got that one side. You can see a little bit of UV ice dub and the rest of those CDC fibers. Now I'm going to take that 17-aught thread and split it and create my dubbing brush. The trick with splitting 17-aught thread is you'll see I'll take my bodkin, lift it up. First off, it's unwound a little bit. Use my finger as a backing. It'll flatten against my finger, and then I point at the middle of it, and it'll split. Now put my clip in there. See, I just have very few UV ice dub fibers. Now I create my brush. What's nice is that the CDC fibers are very light, and so the 17-aught thread is more than capable of holding it. And now take that medallion sheeting and pull it all the way over right behind the eye of my hook, and that's my tie-in point. I'll trim with these nippers that let me go really flush. Now I'll do a couple wraps right behind the eyes too. And I'm actually going to tie off behind the eyes. Trim off my thread. And I got, since it's white thread, it does show up a little bit. I'll take a marker and touch it up a bit. And that's a Spanish Copic, Spanish olive. I love that color. It's that tertiary color. I take my black marker. I don't really need it, but just to darken them up, I'll color the outside. Didn't quite get all the white, so I'm going to take my marker again and touch up some of that white thread I can see. Now I'm going to take my UV resin and I'm going to coat my wing case with it and also a little bit of the eyes. Mostly where I have the marker. It'll help protect those eyes so that they stay dark for quite much longer. It builds up a nice little head in there too. I'm going to hit it with my laser curing light. Doesn't take very long. I'm not using very much UV resin. This is UV nonsense that I'm using here. The fly is done.